need to end by 8, so
And there's things that we need to finish for the charrette today, though. So let's make good use of our time.
sure.
All right, the recording has started. So does someone want to begin the welcome?
How can we do an effective and abbreviated welcome? Welcome.
Well, we can, yeah, we
Uh,
can begin by saying welcome to the first Heartwork and Philosophy guild meeting of 2025. And we will do a brief uh, land acknowledgement and a brief reference to why we are the Heartwork Guild, and then I think move into looking at our priorities, of which I understand the main one is the charrette, which is coming up quickly. Is this acceptable?
Works for me.
Would you, Ben, like to do the land acknowledgement, or would you like us?
I'm pleased to do it.
All right.
And we start with the land because the land was here before we were. The land will continue here long after we are gone. And so we start by acknowledging the land to give us a sense of appropriate perspective on our role in the greater scheme of things. A reminder that we are all part of an interconnected web, and that what we do here in this meeting today, how you do this is how you do everything. And so we bring our minds together around the fact that we are part of a much larger organic whole. And in doing so, we also acknowledge our debt of gratitude to Indigenous cultures for sharing this wisdom and keeping this wisdom alive. And we allow it to motivate ourselves to right relations and right practice. And with that, I encourage us all just to take a few deep breaths in, reminding ourselves of being organisms in a place kept alive by the oxygen that we breathe in, that was created by the plants that use the carbon dioxide that we exhale. And one deep breath in, breathing in fresh energy, and on the exhale, release anything that keeps you from being present with us today. And when you're ready, join us in the circle. Hmm. And back to one of you.
You did such a good job to start, April. Would you like to continue?
Um,
And just
we,
so that you feel more comfortable, you know as much as I do.
we
Well,
have
and actually, I can give us the agenda today is fixed for us, and it is to review changes to our driver statement and to formulate a proposal in response to the RFPs that came out of the Stewardship Council meeting. So we have two clear and specific tasks, and that is all we have time for today, anyhow.
okay. Um, well, just to reference that this guild has a series of agreements that we work with, and that we see our function as being the emotional heart of the Lifeboat Academy. And we work with relationships in which, whatever way we can, in any direction at all. Um, and we have certain responsibilities, which include conviviality, but also checking out the vibes emotionally and then connecting around our responsibilities with other guilds as well. Anything to add to that, Roland?
I think that's great.
All right. Well, I propose that we get right to the agenda that has just been referenced by Ben. And the first item would be,
Oops, not that. Pay no attention. would be that. There, that screen. And I will do some background, make it a little bigger so it's easier to see. So we are using version control now, and we are updating the version 1.0 of the Heartwork and Philosophy driver statement. And the final one will be confirmed at the charrette.
Right.
And so we are going over draft changes. It's still drafty. And we can make any additions that we want to, knowing that it has to be negotiated with the coordination circle. And we have, actually Linda's not on there. So we do have Ruth, who is interested in joining the Heartwork Guild, and we may have other lifeboat builders who might be interested in joining. So we will have an updated membership as we move into the new year. The original driver statement is kept the same, but we have added from our annual review process this kind of clarification. Heartwork is about how we work together, and as such, it overlaps with every guild. So we're fundamentally the keeper of the agreements and how we want to be working together and showing up. And that means both sort of creating the spaces for those discussions, and also, as April was saying, the vibes watcher, that those agreements are living in all of the work that we do. And it's the content that happens from the process and the practices that support that content being healthy. So yeah, we're kind of maintaining the container. In terms of our specific responsibilities, we are in charge of the agreements. We are also the host of the Connect the Dots Club, which is the current incarnation of the longer term goal of creating spaces to build and deepen internal relationships. That's one form that it takes. We also host the morning circles and the agreement circles. So those are put in our domain. And in terms of chores, it's really just, keeping those activities, hosting and keeping them alive, and then onboarding new members to the guilds. That's really our day-to-day responsibilities. And the metrics is something I just added in here. We had some long-term goals that remained fuzzy, and we talked in the annual planning about talking more about indicators, specific things that we can be looking for. So these are just items that have come up in other conversations that are put in here really as a placeholder, but it's looking at things like how many circles do we host, how many people attend those circles, number of badges earned in particular areas, and that we also are supporting people earning badges, tending circles, and generally we support the overall level of engagement of people, not in any specific way, but in, we all support the engagement of people in the Lifeboat Academy. And yeah, this doesn't change at all, the interdependencies and the dedicated resources. So that the next section is really about what are the RFP items. So I think at that, it's probably worth a reaction round just to see in this first section, thoughts, questions, reactions, anything for the good of the cause. And do we have a circle established? The way I see it is Roland, April, me. But
Okay.
so,
I think the driver statement so far looks great. I like the addition that was made. And I don't have, and I like I also like the reading, the reworking of the primary functions, the shift in wording. I think it feels really good. over to April.
I agree with Ron. And it does really reflect what I remember that we've discussed and what we've learned over the last year as well, which is very good that we're able to recognize that and someone has articulated it. So that's very helpful, I find. I have nothing else to say. On to Ben.
Well, yeah, that's good. I mean, it should be non-controversial because it really is stuff that just grew out of the conversations we had around what are we learning and what refinements do we want to make. So it's good that that's lining up. All right, so in terms of the main focus of our time together today is really what is the proposal that we want to put forward in the charrette for the focused activity of the Heartwork Guild for the next year, for 2025. At the last Stewardship Council meeting, we discussed a number of requests that we wanted to put out to the guilds. I have done a little selection around the ones that seem most appropriate to Heartwork. So there's a link to the overall report, which has the full list of requests in there. But just to keep things a little bit more focused, I picked the ones that are here. So the first thing was all the guilds have a cross-pollination request. And specifically for Heartwork, it is what have we learned about working with the agreements that could be helpful in the other guilds? What's the connection between the circle process and sociocracy? So one of the things we've talked about that how can, as the keeper of the agreements, how do we support the other guilds in making sure that those agreements are effective for them? We also, this is kind of an across the board request, is what are some more effective ways of sharing the conversations that we have internally with a broader audience? In particular, other guilds have different aspects of this. For example, outreach is really thinking about what's the channel, where do these things go? But for us, the question is to think about is how do we capture the interesting bits so that we can move them on to some other, sharing place. How do we come up with what the interesting things are that we want to share? And we have we've talked about the farmistry aspect of the farm, how we want to in 2025 we want to kind of highlight that. So in particular, what role does Heartwork have in articulating that? Obviously, Heartwork isn't going to be responsible for hosting the farmistry per se, but what role could we have? And also, I want to underscore the job for us to do is what is reasonable for us to take on, what's the biggest bang for the buck. So just because there's a request does not mean that we have to fulfill it. So for any of these, we can decide, interesting question, but not on our agenda for now. We're going to give a pass to that. So it could be, this is one of those areas where we may or may not think that we have a good role there. And then next up is the cohort 2025 lifeboat builders. And this one is what aspect of that work, of that program do we take on? Are we responsible for? And also thinking about as new people are coming in through the cohort, how do we onboard them into the Heartwork Guild? How do we bring them up to speed on what we're doing and integrate them into the work? And then finally, we all of the guilds have a request to think around engagement and reciprocity. And I think that's sort of double duty in the guild. How do we think about engagement and reciprocity? And then is there any way that Heartwork in more generally supports engagement and reciprocity in the work of other guilds in the academy? So what I'm going to propose is that we do a round for clarifying questions, and then we go into gathering considerations, and we just start to use that process to see what comes forward in terms of what feels like the best priorities. And gathering considerations, it's brainstorming rules, so anything is good for the cause. It can be concerns, ideas, opportunities, questions. The only thing that we try to do is do one item at a time so that they can layer up more easily. And so I'm going to say round for questions for clarification, and then we go into gathering considerations. And I'm going to do notes. I'll keep this screen up, but I'm going to do notes in the Asana task. And so you can follow along there. So Roland, over to you. Questions for clarification?
No questions for clarification. Ready to jump into considerations. Over to April.
No question for clarification, except to say, are we planning to answer these questions here now today, or are we passing on some of this activity to the charrette?
We should arrive at the charrette with a proposal. The proposal doesn't have to be fully fleshed out, but it should be as well thought through as possible. And what has happened in the other guilds so far has been, we ended up with a fairly clear sense of this is what we're proposing. And then we handed it off to somebody that would shape that proposal, just sort of flesh it out a little bit.
Okay. I also wanted to comment that these seem to be the really key things. And some of the questions are not easy to answer possibly, but that's okay. And that's partly why we exist, is to try to explore and define a little bit and to shape things so people get a different sense. And it's not just us going, oh yeah, this feels like Heartwork or whatever. On to Ben.
Yeah, and I think that's yeah. I'm going to just dive into continuing considerations, because I think April, you got to start it off there. From moment to moment, I mean, I think that I was going to say that our role in supporting the 2025 lifeboat builders seems like a really good starting point. And we have some really good tools already, between the Agreement Circle and the Connect the Dots Club. That kind of feels like a no-brainer. And it makes me wonder, where else can we, it's sort of like we can host on demand Connect the Dots Club and Agreement Circles. That doesn't seem like a stretch. So where do we stretch? So that's my first kind of thought. Over to you, Roland.
Well, and we've never talked about conflict of interest between guilds. Because I have a conflict of interest between guilds. The Farm Guild and the Farmistery, that is, I think Heartwork has an important role to actively play in the Farmistery, because the how do we work together? How do we think about things? Agreements is really central to the Farmistery experience, and central to the Lifeboat Academy. So, and we have, at the very least, we have in in our driver statement that we host the morning circles, which happen on the farm, and yeah, which I think of as being key to the experience of being on the farm, being an opportunity to be able to not only check in and be present to each other first thing in the morning, or early in the morning, relatively early in the morning. Anyway, but also to bring people back to the purpose of not only of their stay at the Farmistery, but of the Farmistery itself in relation to everything else. So I put a vote in for that one, over to April.
Yeah, from what you're saying, Roland, I mean, it seems to me this stuff is more integrated than it might look like in print here. Um, and I'm just wondering, I mean, there's the practice that already happens, and then how do we look at the learning that comes out of the practice? So are we talking about a totally experiential way of bringing the new cohort into this? And then is there another spot to kind of examine what has gone on, to do, a reflective process about that? And hearing from them why it's important as they grow to understand what's going on in different levels, I guess. Um, I'm, well, am I allowed to do more than one thing at once, or should I pass on to Ben?
One thing at once.
And
Um, yeah, this is where some of that being cosmolocal is tricky, because I recognize it's sort of the only ones who are actually resident on the farm right now are Roland and I. And so even though it's a Heartwork responsibility, it's not a Heartwork responsibility that could be shared in any way until we have other people who are also resident here. And it's the same, and I think that there is a question about, can we take what we get from the on the farm morning circle and offer it up in a different format, like as a Zoom kind of thing. And how would that work? Could this be, there's an element of it that, I'm a huge advocate for online. I think online is almost the same as in person, and I very rarely say we need to do things in person, but this does have a feel to me that's like, I don't know. It would be an interesting experiment to see if it does translate into an online environment. So I don't feel like there's a conflict between the guilds. I think there's a conflict between the online on in-person aspect of this, which is why in my mind I just kind of figured on in-person is farm, and that's why this goes in the farm, even though it is a Heartwork responsibility. Anyhow, over to you, Roland.
Well, and I think this is where we have the whole overlap of guilds. Even in responding to April wanting to, I felt like you were talking about appreciative inquiry around the learning that happens from Curiosity Guild activities, and that would be Curiosity Guild domain. So Curiosity Guild works with Heartwork, that works with the Farm Guild. Same thing, one of the things in the RFP is how can Heartwork help more retreats to happen? And the purposes of the retreats, I could totally see having to do with Heartwork type topics. So uh, I think one of the reasons why I'm attracted to the whole pharmastery idea is that it is a way of creating sustainability for the Lifeboat Academy overall, because we need to start figuring out how to have more of an income for the farm so that it doesn't just come out of our pockets all the time. And there's so much that happens in the domain that I think of as Heartwork, or that we've agreed on as Heartwork, that I think is the gift, to offer for that would be useful for people who would come to the pharmastery. So I guess it is I guess I started to outline, started to list things that I thought of as parts of the gift, but it may be talking about what actually are the broad categories of the gifts so that we can get to what the specific gifts are. Anyway, I think I'm tangenting all over the place, I feel. I think so. Hard work, if the retreats, the types of retreats that we could advertise that people would benefit from and would be attracted to, I think many of them come from hard work. Over to April.
Yeah, I think the practical outcome of this can be the retreat stuff. But it seems to me we're talking about two different levels. We're talking about the direct experience of being on the farm and of living with these practices over time. That's one thing. And then seeing what happens, reporting back on that. And then the other piece is how do we share with people who are not on the farm and who might not be coming to retreats what the experience is of the atmosphere that's created at the pharmacery that is so conducive to good life, good health, good relations. That's the same stuff, but I think needs to be expressed a different way. And it is then that expression that could be linked to the new cohort. Because as I understand it, the cohort is all virtual and they may be asking, and they should be asking at this point, how does all of this come together and how am I connected with myself and my heart work to this? And am I connected? And I think working around that question leads to engagement. Over to Ben. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
I did two things there.
Well, and I think it's gentle discipline. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think about like, so what? And what does that look like in the relatively, what's a reasonable thing? And a reasonable part to take on. And this is where, we continue to, hit this um chicken and an egg thing of, arranging retreats on site is challenging until we have some material stuff in place to make it easier to have the retreats, and the retreats will help it make a lot of that whole
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what to do. How do we, what is a reasonable thing to take on as a starting point for, trying to, would be hosting a single retreat this year be enough of a goal, like to figure out um like one on-site retreat, one Heartwork focused on-site retreat with, the same sort of thing. How many people do we want to have involved in it? How do we, who's it aimed at? How's it work? And I'm not putting that forward as a formal proposal. I'm just saying, like, what is the one thing that's enough to kind of move us forward? Over to you, Roland.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Just working on a mock-up of what a retreat would look like so that we can populate the idea um, with a proposal. Yeah, and yeah, yeah. One thing. Over to April.
Yeah, I think having the goal that you talked of, Ben, is a good thing. And I think coming to that goal, there is a process of planning that we'll do a whole bunch more once we go through that. Over to Ben.
So then it seems like I'm just trying to track ideas that seem to be floating to the surface, that one thing in our proposal would be to plan
Yeah.
to plan to host an on-site, a Heartwork to take on one model retreat to be hosted on at the Pharmastery as far as we can get, starting with a coherent plan. And then the other thing is, I guess it's not really even much of a proposal. We'll continue as part of our responsibilities, as our chores, hosting Connect the Dots and connect the dots in the agreement circles. That's kind of an easy one. And I guess there's that other part to it too, then, which is something about, and I think this probably requires a little unpacking. April, your point about what are we learning from the morning circle in an ongoing iterative way, and how does that translate into other contexts? And I'm not sure how to make that more granular. But anyhow, so that's what's occurring to me, is it feels like there are these three components already. One is kind of keep on keeping on with Connect the Dots Club and agreement circles. The next one is an actual project to try to host a retreat. And then the third is this kind of how do we glean from the on-site activity in a way that's useful. Okay, over to you, Roland.
I don't know if I have anything to add. Just occurs to me how, there's overlap between guilds, and there's also overlap between these proposals, these RFPs. Yeah. Over to April.
I think there's a segue to engagement and reciprocity in here somehow, by once we get some stuff organized and once we have the cohort kind of cohorting, there's something about consistently asking questions about, why are you here? What is it that has pulled you here? Is it a vision, or is it some sense of connection that you have already? Is it pure curiosity? Is it that you've, looked at 5 other systems like this and this seems most promising? What is it? Because that feeds into both engagement and reciprocity. Because the next thing you can say to people is, once they tell you why they're kind of interested in sliding into engagement, is, how are you planning to fit the notion of reciprocity into your actions? I keep coming back to the fact I think reciprocity is a burning key thing in all of this. Over to Ben.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? So we've already started that with the orientation, and we're really clear from the very start in the orientation. It is about reciprocity. Reciprocity means different things, so think about what it means to you. But the thing that's really standing out with me is this consistently asking the same question, and that also makes me think of how do we capture the interesting insights in our conversations in a way that can be shared.
Yeah.
I can't quite remember now, but I know outreach, that was sort of the key part of that proposal. And I'm totally blanking on it right now, but it was really about figuring out ways of it's almost interviewing the new cohort, for figuring out ways that there can be kind of a reflective, we do a prompt what's your takeaway in a way that is mutually beneficial because it's encouraging that reflection process, and it is something that can get shared out. But there's some, and I think this is also what is countercultural. One of the things that's countercultural here is we have this idea of knowledge being something that you achieve and then you're done. You know, like you learn the answers on the test, and that, yeah, I answered that question already, as opposed to, you know, the oral tradition aspect of it, where it's like always a moving target, and that same question still has value to ask, even when even when you think you already know the answer. Do you really? So yeah, there's something about the consistency of asking the question. Yeah. Over to you, Roland.
Um, just a little housekeeping. I feel like my brain isn't really here. So I had something to say and now it's gone. Did I write it down? I didn't even bother to write it down. Oh, yeah, for the outreach, I think if I remember correctly, it was kind of getting testimonials, but not the big experience testimonial, but kind of what stood out for you, but actually using that in sharing out people's reactions to their experience. So sort of on the website and or on social media or whatever, just starting to gather, and that there's also that could potentially become information that would be useful for the Curiosity Guild, and tracking outcomes, I suppose.
Mhm. Mhm.
Maybe I'm trying to remember also. So over to and yeah, the how to deepen engagement and reciprocity I think is a really interesting one, because in talking about active doing things and in offering things that becomes a tool for engagement and reciprocity in and of itself. So over to April.
That was really helpful, what you just said, Roland. It helped frame some things for me. Thank you. In fact, I might even give you a token. I understand that we're we're entering the token economy. Um, now I've forgotten my point.
It's catching.
uh, Spirals. That was my point. Somehow having a few metaphors for the contraflow of things and spirals can be so helpful. And having people look for their own spirals. And hearing other people talk about theirs. I've recently had some experiences of that. It's kind of like, it's mind-blowing and grounding at the same time. It made me relax a lot. Over to bed.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. I think I'm wondering if I'm still not sure what this turns into in terms of a proposal for Heartwork. And I am also wondering if going back to the questions, if we were to work on hosting one retreat, planning that out, figuring out what it would be, figuring out what that could look like, and we do Connect the Dots Club and agreement circles, and we do something around this, asking the question around the morning circles, whatever that is. Would that be enough for this guild for this year? is there anything, and that's why I'm kind of looking back at the questions here. In some ways, I feel like whatever this second thing is, the making the spirals more visible, asking those consistent questions. If we could figure out how that works, that would be a contribution to effective sharing. It would also be part of what we're offering to the other guilds could do. We have a contribution to the pharmastery and to the cohort, and that would the second, whatever this unnamed second thing is, could also be a contribution to the cohort that we're talking about, which would also possibly deepen engagement and reciprocity. So yeah, I mean, I guess it feels to me like if we can kind of focus in this second part, what would that actually look like? That might be enough for, what we're presenting at the charrette. Over to you, Roland.
Well, I forgot that there was the rest on for the how to deepen engagement and reciprocity, and I was looking at it and I was thinking, well, and I'm not sure if this is Curiosity Guild or if this is hard work, but could it be would it be useful to the other guilds to turn that into something that they can use when talking through an offering? Like, because other guilds should be
Yeah.
coming up with things that would be useful for the Lifeboat Academy. So who would be best? Which guild would be best? So I'm proposing that a list of things to think about, a little bit, maybe even a little bit along the lines of the 6 conversations. What are
Right.
the types of questions to ask yourselves about when you want to make an offering, to consider these points, or these questions rather than points, I should say. Yeah, so then is that hard work or uh, Curiosity Guild type work? So that it become, anyway, over to April.
Yes, let's do that. Over to Ben.
Yeah, I like, well, yeah, I think, it feels to me like it certainly could be heart work in terms of, because if we think heart work is really about how do we want to work together, and I'm also now on my right brain, left brain kick for the time being, and how we work together. I think heart work, we have a tendency to drift a little right hemisphere, which is good and an important balancer, but that something that pulls us back left hemisphere, like a checklist, like here is, we can talk deeply about compassion and showing up for others and everything, but here's a checklist to ask yourself about, how are we working together the way we want to be working together, or like your when we make an offering, how do we make sure that we're thinking it through in terms of engagement and reciprocity? Um, yeah, I feel like I like the potential there. So over to you again, Roland.
I was just thinking about the number of times um, I've been accused of doing research before doing something by people who say, I just like to do stuff. You spend all of your time researching. And that's part of like bringing harmony between the right brain and left brain type activity, because you need both. You need to, and I think that's what we're espousing and we're promoting. Um, so yeah, I was just thinking that. Over to April.
Yeah. Uh, uh, I I love the checklist idea. Um, And we've got a set of questions right here in terms of the reciprocity stuff, but it's broader than that because it talks about relating to sustainable finances. So thinking about retreats as a way of exhibiting pharmastery stuff and becoming more sustainable. So being brought back to that, and instead of going, oh yeah, of course we'd consider that. This actually nails it down, or pins it down. Perhaps nail is a bit too firm.
Mhm.
Uh, Pins it down or put Scotch tape on it so it can't get away.
Mhm.
Um, I think we've got part of a tool right there already, and I think offering that to other guilds is a great step. Over to Ben.
Yeah, I think it just feels to me like we need to focus it in a little bit. So it is, and I think a framing of that is we have led the Connect, and our domain includes Connect the Dots Club. We've done a number of things: deep adaptation, 6 conversations, and talking about our inspirational sources. And a contribution then, it sort of seems like our contribution to engagement and reciprocity is capturing what feel like promising leads from the Connect the Dots Club around reciprocity and engagement as a checklist that can be used by other guilds in certain contexts. And I think that's what's the context. It could be considering a new offering. That was the original idea. And I think it's also um, it's kind of almost like well, actually, maybe it is just thinking about reciprocity and engagement. Like how do you deepen engagement? That's all for now. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Over to you, Roland.
I'm looking at the time, it is 2:53. I think we've how do we feel like in this conversation we have chosen some RFPs that we want to work on? And we can continue this conversation, but we have a starting point at least that we can bring to the charrette.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I guess now it is sort of preparing it for coherence for the charrette. And is anyone volunteering to do that, to make it coherent?
I'm volunteering to help somebody to make it coherent.
Okay,
And what I'm trying to do right now is for simplicity, I'm saying we have proposal 1, proposal 2, and ongoing chores. Ongoing chores, Connect the Dots Club, Agreement Circle, Morning Circle. Keep on keeping on. Proposal 1, plan and propose a what are we calling it? Retreat. Proposal 1, develop a Heartwork focused retreat that could happen on the Pharmastery. Proposal number 2, glean lessons from hosting the Connect the Dots Club around engagement and reciprocity into a focus tool that other guilds could use when. So,
and well, to begin with, let's continue popcorning for this last bit. And I don't feel like we need much more than that. I think for me, that sounds like it's pretty much it. over to you, or we're popcorning, so jump in.
So, at what point do we do more work on it? Is that during the charrette, or is that after the charrette, or
Well, here's what I'm going to propose a sort of let's and I this is simple enough that I can write it up, and then we can circle it around via email
yeah,
for revisions, and then it will get fleshed out a little bit. We may have some more questions, like what's the deliverable and the timeline and the parameters and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think I'm fine. I can write this up as sort of our draft proposal, send it around to the group. We can comment on it, and then I think it's ready to offer up for the charrette.
wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, yeah. And then we can sleep on it too, like um, new ideas may emerge. Wow, and talk about
And
efficient use of time.
yeah, and it's also a proposal that we're
Yeah,
bringing to the charrette. And a part of it is using it as a tool to let people know who might be interested in the hard work to
yeah.
whether or not they want to join. And
Uh-huh.
then it just makes sense that we would actually flesh it out with the new Hard Work and Philosophy Guild group.
Mhm. Cool. All right. Um, boom, done. 2 minutes to spare. So, quick checkout round. What are you taking with you today? A
We can
lot.
do things in under an hour. Woo! Good for you, April.
Yeah, that's I'm taking that with me, but also the fact that we are it's almost like a distilling process going on, and that worked easier than I thought it might.
Yeah.
Uh, we'll have to remember that I actually, and we all have, and collectively we have a distillery at our disposal, and to use that as a bit of a model, because sometimes I panic when I'm faced with things and think, "Oh, I have no ideas. I have no framework. I don't know what my name is." So this is very helpful for me. So that's what I'm taking away, Ben.
Yeah, I think I'm having exactly the same. I was in a meeting the other day and I felt like the group was where we were, a year ago. And remember the frustration of how ambiguous everything was, and it felt like we were just sort of bumping around in the dark. And talking about the spirals, right? It's there's have being able to share with confidence, it gets easier, and it gets more the discomfort gets more familiar, and it's sort of like just relax. It's all those jokes, right? Let it be simple, just relax, don't worry about it. Well, good enough for now. It really works. So imagine that. All righty. Well, here we are, closing by 3. So
Have a
enjoy the
good
rest of your day,
other
everyone.
have a good other meeting, both of
Thank
you.
you. Yes.
Bye.
Bye.